I matched with this girl named Alina on Tinder, and within maybe 10 messages she asked if I wanted to meet for dinner that same night. Normally, I wouldn't have agreed that fast, but she seemed normal, and honestly, her profile looked better than most of the fake ones I'd been seeing. She picked the restaurant, this quiet Italian place about 20 minutes from me, and when I got there she was already sitting at a table near the back like she'd been waiting longer than she expected to. The weird part was that the second I sat down, she smiled at me in this relieved way and said, "There you are. I was starting to think you were going to do what you always do and show up late." I kind of laughed because I thought she was joking, but she didn't laugh with me. She just kept smiling like it was some inside joke between us, and then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I remember pulling my hand back and saying something like, "Yeah, traffic was bad," mostly because I didn't know how else to respond without making it awkward right away. Then she started talking about how glad she was that we were finally doing our place again, and I stopped her and said I'd never been there before. She looked confused for maybe half a second, then just said, "Right. Sorry, long day." After that, I tried to reset the whole thing and asked her basic first date questions. Where she worked, what part of town she lived in, how long she'd been on the app, stuff like that. She answered, but every answer drifted into something that sounded way too familiar. She said she hated when I asked questions I already knew the answers to. She said I used to think her laugh was annoying until I got used to it. At one point, she mentioned a weekend trip to Chattanooga like I'd been there with her, and when I told her I hadn't, she gave me this look that honestly made me feel guilty, like I was gaslighting her or something, even though I knew for a fact I'd never seen this girl in my life. By the time the food came, I was already thinking about how I was going to leave early. Then she started talking about my apartment. Not in a vague way either. She asked if I'd finally fixed the loose handle on the bathroom sink, and then she asked if my upstairs neighbor still vacuumed after midnight. Both of those things were true. I had never told her that. I know people say that a lot in stories like this, but I mean it literally. We had only talked in the app, and our messages were short enough to fit on one screen. I asked her how she knew any of that, and she just shrugged and said, "Because I've been there. Don't do that thing where you act like I'm crazy." At that point, I told her this wasn't funny anymore. Her expression changed fast when I said that. She didn't get angry exactly. She just looked hurt, like I was embarrassing her in public. She lowered her voice and said, "You really don't remember any of it, do you?" I asked her what she was talking about, and she said, "The months before you left. The nights you said you'd never do this to me." I remember just staring at her because there was no way to answer something that insane. Then she reached into her purse and slid her phone across the table. On the screen was a picture of me asleep on my couch. I picked up the phone thinking it had to be edited somehow, but it wasn't some random image from social media. It was my couch, my old gray blanket, my living room lamp in the corner, all of it. There were more when she swiped. Me standing in my kitchen in a t-shirt I only wore at home. Me sitting at my desk with my back turned. One photo was taken from my bedroom doorway while I was apparently asleep in bed. I asked her where she got them, and she said, completely calm, "You sent them to me when things were still good." I said that was impossible, and she leaned closer and whispered, "Then why are they all from inside your apartment?" I stood up right there and told her I was leaving. She didn't try to stop me. She just sat there with that same disappointed look and said, "If you go home right now, don't check the closet first." That made me freeze for maybe 1 second, because I hadn't told her I had a closet in the hallway, and it was one of those stupid details that shouldn't matter, but somehow does when you're scared. I left anyway, paid cash at the front, and drove home with my heart pounding the whole way. I kept telling myself she'd found a way to follow me, or maybe hired somebody, or maybe she somehow knew someone I knew. All of that sounded impossible, but it still sounded better than the alternative. When I got back to my apartment, every light inside was already on. I know I hadn't left them that way because I'm weird about electric bills, and I always turn everything off before leaving. I stayed in my car for a minute just staring at my window, trying to work up the nerve to go inside. When I finally did, nothing looked stolen, and nothing looked moved. It was almost worse that way. I checked the kitchen, the bathroom, under the bed, everywhere except the hallway closet she mentioned. I saved that for last. When I opened it, there was a place setting on the floor for 2 people, neatly arranged like a picnic. 2 plates, 2 glasses, 2 folded napkins. And right in the middle was a framed picture of me at that restaurant, taken through the front window maybe 20 minutes earlier, with her reflection standing beside me before I had even gone in. A few months ago, my sister was 8 months pregnant and scrambling to get the last of the baby stuff she still needed. She found a listing on Facebook Marketplace for a free crib, and since I had the bigger car, I told her I'd go pick it up for her. The post looked normal. It was just a white crib with a short caption saying the owner needed it gone that day because they were moving. The woman selling it, or I guess giving it away, replied right away and sent me an address in an older part of town with a message that just said, "Please come before dark." I got there around 6 in the evening, and the house immediately felt off. It wasn't run down exactly. It just looked too still, like nobody had lived there for a long time, even though there was a car in the driveway and a porch light on. The front door was already cracked open before I knocked, and a woman from inside told me I could come in because the crib was upstairs, and she couldn't carry it herself. I almost said no right there, but she looked maybe in her late 40s, kind of tired, and I didn't want to be rude over something that could still be perfectly normal. So I stepped inside and texted my sister the address just in case. The first thing I noticed was the photos. There were framed family pictures everywhere, way more than most people have out, covering the walls in the hallway, going up the stairs, lining tables in the living room. But every single one had the faces scratched out. Not ripped, not marked with ink, scratched. Deep enough that the paper underneath was showing through in white streaks. Husbands, kids, grandparents, even pets in some of them. Every face was ruined except one. Mine. Or at least a face that looked exactly like mine. Same hair, same nose, same scar near my eyebrow. In some of them I looked younger, in some older, but it was me enough that my stomach dropped before I even fully understood what I was seeing. I asked the woman what that was about, trying to sound calmer than I felt. She looked at the nearest picture and said, "Those started changing after you left." I actually laughed because that was so insane I thought maybe it was some kind of prank. But she didn't react. She just started walking up the stairs and told me the crib was in the second room on the left. I followed because I honestly didn't know what else to do. My body had that frozen feeling where every choice feels wrong. As I passed the photos on the stairway, I saw more of the same thing. Whole family portraits with every face clawed out except mine, right in the middle, smiling like I belonged there. The crib was already disassembled in the upstairs room, stacked in clean pieces like she'd been expecting me for hours. The room itself looked like a nursery that had been half packed and then abandoned. There were pale squares on the walls where decorations used to hang, and a rocking chair facing the corner. I told her I was just going to load the crib up and leave, and she nodded like that was fine. Then she said, "Your sister will need the blanket too. He sleeps better when he has something familiar." I asked who she meant by he, and she looked at me like I was the strange one and said, "The baby, of course. He already knows your voice." I told her I didn't want the blanket and bent down to grab the crib rails. While I was doing that, I noticed a baby monitor sitting on the dresser with the screen turned on. It showed the room from the opposite corner, except the angle was impossible because there was no camera mounted anywhere. On the screen, I could see myself kneeling on the floor. I could see the woman standing behind me, and I could see a small child sitting in the rocking chair, even though when I turned around, the chair in the real room was empty and still. I stood up so fast I hit my shoulder on the crib frame, and when I looked back at the monitor, the child was gone. That was enough for me. I said I was leaving and started carrying pieces downstairs as fast as I could, mostly because I wanted an excuse to keep moving. She followed me the whole time, not helping, just watching. On my second trip down, I noticed one photo near the front door that I somehow hadn't seen before. It was recent. I could tell by the clothes I was wearing in it. It showed me standing in my own kitchen holding a mug, looking out the window like I'd heard something outside. Scratched into the glass over the frame were the words, "Welcome back." I dropped the crib rail right there and told her she needed to explain what the hell was going on. She didn't answer right away. She just tilted her head and said almost gently, "I knew your sister would send you." Then she told me her son had brought me home years ago when they were little, only I wasn't little anymore by the next morning. According to her, I kept changing after that. Taller, older, different every time she saw me, but always still me. She said the others in the pictures didn't change right, so she got rid of them. I remember backing toward the door while she talked, still holding my keys between my fingers like that would somehow help. Then she said, "You were never supposed to come back without him." I got outside, threw the crib pieces back onto the porch, and drove off without shutting my trunk. I called my sister and told her not to take anything from strangers again, but I didn't tell her the real reason. I wouldn't have even known how. When I got home, I checked my text thread with the marketplace seller to block her, and the listing was gone along with the messages, like the whole account had never existed. I thought that was the end of it until 2 nights later, when my sister sent me a picture from the baby shower. In the background, assembled in the corner of her nursery, was that same white crib. Tucked over the side rail was a folded baby blanket, embroidered with one word in faded blue stitching: Auntie. A few years ago, I went through a phase where I tried streaming on YouTube, mostly late at night after work. Nothing serious. I'd just do little Q&A streams or talk about movies, weird news stories, whatever. I never had an audience. On a good night, maybe 10 people showed up, and half of them were probably the same friends lurking in the chat out of pity. The night this happened, I titled the stream something lazy like, "Ask Me Anything Before I Sleep," and went live a little after midnight. For the first 20 minutes, it was dead quiet except for the same handful of usernames saying normal stuff. I remember the number because I kept checking it out of habit. It stayed at 12 viewers almost the entire stream. Not 11, not 13, just 12. I even joked about it at one point, saying I was apparently destined to perform for the same tiny cursed audience forever. A couple people asked me basic questions, like what mic I used, and whether I'd ever tell any personal stories from my old apartment, which I thought was odd because I hadn't mentioned moving. Still, nothing felt truly wrong yet. It was just that slow, awkward kind of stream, where you keep talking mostly to avoid noticing how empty it is. Then all at once the chat stopped moving. No new comments, no emoji spam, nothing. I thought maybe the stream froze, so I glanced at my second monitor to check the preview. It said I was still live. My face was still moving. The viewer count was still 12. Then a new message appeared. It said, "Don't look behind you." A second later, another account posted the exact same thing. Then another. Within maybe 3 seconds, all 12 names in the chat had sent the same message. Letter for letter. No delay between them. Just a wall of identical warnings, stacking so fast it pushed everything else out of view. At first I assumed it was a troll thing, like maybe one person with multiple accounts trying to be funny. I laughed it off and said something like, "That only works if I'm dumb enough to play along." The chat stopped again after that. Completely dead. That was the part that got under my skin. Usually trolls keep going if they get a reaction, but these accounts had all gone silent at the exact same moment. I kept talking, but now I was listening more than speaking. My apartment was quiet except for my computer fan and the little clicking sound my fridge made every few minutes. Then I heard something else, very soft, from behind me. A short knock, not at the door, on the wall. I turned around without thinking. There was nothing behind me except the hallway leading to my bedroom and bathroom. I said that on stream too, kind of to prove the chat wrong. But when I turned back to the monitor, the preview window had changed. It was still my room, still my desk, still me in the chair, but the angle was slightly farther back, like the camera had been moved behind where my webcam actually was. In that preview, down the hallway behind me, there was someone standing just out of the light. I whipped around again, and the hallway in real life was empty. On the screen, the figure was still there. I ended the stream right then, or at least I tried to. I clicked end stream, got the confirmation box, clicked it again, and the live icon stayed red. The chat reopened by itself, and all 12 accounts started typing again. This time the message was, "We can still see you." I unplugged the webcam, and my face disappeared from the little square in my streaming software, but the live preview on YouTube kept going. Not only that, it slowly panned to the right on its own, away from my chair and toward the hallway. I remember backing away from my desk and watching my own channel show me a part of my apartment that no camera in my room should have been able to capture. The thing in the hallway moved before I did. It didn't step out dramatically or rush the camera. It just leaned, enough for part of its face to slide into the light. What bothered me most was how ordinary it looked at first. It was just a man, pale, expressionless, wearing a dark hoodie. Then it leaned a little farther, and I realized I was looking at myself. Not exactly, but close enough that the differences felt wrong rather than reassuring. Same hairline, same mouth, same tired look around the eyes. The chat kept posting the same line over and over. "That one is watching too." I grabbed my phone and ran out of the apartment without even closing my laptop. I sat in my car calling YouTube support like an idiot, as if there was a number for, "My stream is showing a camera that doesn't exist." After maybe 10 minutes, I checked my channel from my phone. The stream had finally ended on its own. It had saved as a VOD, so against my better judgment I opened it. The first half was normal. Then came the moment the chat started warning me. But in the recording, I never turned around. I just sat there staring at my screen, listening, while someone who looked exactly like me walked slowly down my hallway in the background and stopped right behind my chair. All 12 accounts had joined the stream before I even went live, and every one of them had the same default profile icon. No uploads, no subscribers, no history. Just one account created date, identical across all of them, from 3 years earlier to the day. That was the day the previous tenant in my apartment building disappeared during his own live stream.